Hello! What you're about to watch is a conversation that occurred last October between myself and fellow content creator Yakuza Archive channel regarding many Kenzan related topics. If you're interested in specific talking points, timestamps will be in the description, along with a link to our guest's YouTube channel. Apologies for the audio quality and occasional footage stutter, but the conversation itself more than makes up for that, in my humble opinion. With all of that said, let the discussion commence. Okay, so I guess we can start from this point kind of semi-officially. So, for anyone who may not be familiar with your content, would you mind doing a brief introduction of what you do on YouTube?
I make videos on Yakuza related things, mostly on either one, Kenzan, first and foremost, that's my main bread and butter. But then I also make videos on little details most people wouldn't know. I've uploaded a couple of the tracks from Yakuza games before, and I've made a couple montages, I think. But mostly just things relating to older Yakuza games that people aren't aware of, whether it be the game itself or things in the game that have no description anywhere online.
Excellent. Okay. Funnily enough, the first time that I came across your channel, it was one of the... I'm pretty sure it was either the cut content of Kenzan or just a general exploration. And I'm so thankful that we actually have someone in the community who's that knowledgeable about this game, because we don't see that much Kenzan content, even though the community is pretty active on YouTube.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame, especially considering, I would understand it if, the game wasn't all that good. You don't really see many videos on the Fist the North Star Yakuza game, and that's mostly because, one, it's half Fist the North Star, so if you like Fist the North Star, you're not gonna like it as much because it's also, half Yakuza, and if you're a Yakuza fan, you're not gonna like it as much because it's, half Fist the North Star, and so most people just, stay away from it, and there's, very little people talking about it online.
Yeah, exactly. And then, licensing hell and all that stuff, which, dear God.
Yeah, especially, it's a shame because Kenzan has two licensed songs, which I think are both fantastic, but I know if it's ever coming west, we're never getting those songs, and it's such a shame because they're really good.
Oh man, I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack in my comments, because specifically when it comes to the intro song, I've actually kind of been a bit rough on it when I did the Yakuza opening tier list, so for anyone unfamiliar, yes, Bushido is an amazing song. I've grown quite favorable towards it in the time since the last video. But, okay, wait, what's the second licensed track? I wasn't actually aware of that.
It's the song Life is Beautiful by, I think it's Ketsumishi or something. There's an emotional moment at the end of the game it starts playing during, and it plays during the credits. But it's a very... During what is a sad moment, it's a sort of you know what, things aren't all bad kind of music, and it's listen to it and sing the ending. It's the kind of thing that you're looking at it and you're like, man, I'm getting emotional here watching this. But yeah, no, that's definitely one that would also be cut with probably replaced with some other standard. They'd probably do some rendition of a classic track and then put it over so that it fits.
I mean, that is a shame, but okay, now we know that there's another cool song, so if anyone's listening, check it out. Speaking of Kenzan, because, yeah, again, it isn't that well covered on YouTube, out of all of the Yakuza games in the series, was there anything in particular that made you cover Kenzan more in depth, as opposed to, I don't know, Ishin or Kurohyou or whatever?
I guess I naturally sort of gravitate towards, games that are less popular than I think they should be. There's a couple games that I'm, a fan of that are, you might have 2 fans of them anywhere within your region. Stuff like that I'm usually a big fan of, and Kenzan especially is in a series that's pretty niche but is getting way more popular. It's crazy to me that even the Kurohyou games are getting more love currently with the fan translations and the fact that most people are aware of them than Kenzan is. And so I wanted to help shine a bit of a spotlight on it before it got a potential remake.
That's amazing, because I've kind of started off on the actual content creator side in a similar way, because when I started doing Kurohyou related stuff, I don't even think we had a full patch for the first game, and I think the second one was just about to drop or something like that, so same thing, people need to know about these games, for the love of God. So yeah. as you've just said, there aren't that many people overtly familiar with Kenzan, even though they should be. So, is there anything specific, like out of the number of topics that we'll cover, that immediately jumps to you as a big selling point of Kenzan specifically?
That's a good question. I guess how unique it is in comparison to later games. There's a certain thing, like, I think around Yakuza 4, they started to get a formula down for like how they wanted to do the story and how they wanted to design the game. That, like, you notice like Yakuza 3 and the ones before it are really rough around the edges in certain ideas. And like 4 has a little bit of that. Like some of the mini games in 4 are a bit like, they feel like they were tested once and then just kind of put in. But like as the games went on, they got way more rounded out. And I feel like Kenzan, despite being also kind of rough around the edges, is a diamond in the rough. Because playing it as a game, finishing it, it feels like despite it being the first PS3 Yakuza game they made, it feels like it was the last one because it has so many quality of life things that for some reason are either ditched in later games or replaced with another mechanic that makes it feel like when you play it, you don't feel like you're playing one of the oldest games. You feel like you're playing a game that was like right before we got like Dragon Engine. So I think that could be a selling point for it, is that it's so, not only is it good, there's so many things in it that you never see again, that are never tried again, that are just sitting there like waiting to be played by someone.
I can definitely vouch for that, because in the time since we first started talking about this collab, I've actually somehow altered the settings on my emulator to manage to boot up Kenzan, and it's already like at maybe half the frame rate that it should be, but I could try out the combat a tiny bit, and it's so flashy and responsive to where it feels like when you fully max out something like Yakuza 2's combat, like it's that responsive, which for anyone who may be kind of more harsh on something like the Blockuza meme, if you know, then getting into something like Kenzan, there's so much more fluidity to it. I can't really explain it that well verbally, but maybe I'll insert some footage here where it's like, yeah, this combat is as amazing as it looks. So yeah, if there was anyone who likes the eccentricities of the Kenzan engine but hasn't played Kenzan by some chance, yeah, just experiment with it. Either get a clear save file or whatever and toy around with it. You're gonna have a blast, especially with, you know, the style switching and everything, which we'll get into.
The one thing I will note for most people is, like, you know, when you jump in, it takes a couple chapters into the game before you start getting a bunch of moves. So like, it's a bit rough if you jump in and immediately assume the rest of the game is going to be like that, because you can, if you're not aware, complete the entire game, like go from start to finish with only getting like a move or two that you have to get in the story, and finish the game and be like, man, that's weird. The combat didn't really feel finished. I don't know where all my upgrades were. It's very possible to do that, but once you get a bunch of your moves, it becomes really fluid and so much fun.
I mean, it's really fun if you want to go for a no upgrade run to where you know that it's actually balanced around it. But
yeah,
because of kind of what you mentioned earlier when we were chatting about, like, the fact that it doesn't have a traditional upgrade system where it's just, here it's more so stat based, and to kind of use Devil Leon's analogy, you have to go to like Bangladesh and China and this and that to acquire very specific moves to expand your arsenal.
Which is, I know for some people, there are some people who, when they play a Yakuza game, they're in there mostly for the story, and they'll do an occasional side thing here and there. That can definitely, I think, hinder people who play like that in some way, because they won't take as much time to do that. But most of the moves that are really important, you just have to go do a bit of training for, which takes like, 2 seconds, or it's like, revisit the trainer every chapter just to check if they have a new move. But I really enjoy that you actively have to work to get your moves, instead of, looking at a list of moves and going, well, I want, the drop kick, or I want the double finisher. In Kenzan, it's like, if you want the double finisher, you got to go, climb over a mountain and then like shoot arrows off the back of a horse to get like the move you want. I really enjoy that it's like that.
Yeah, because here, unlike some of the other games, I feel like the actual exploration feels more intuitive. Like, you wanna check out every nook and cranny because many of the specific environments don't reappear in the other games. So naturally coming across something like you said, where it be a tiger drop or maybe a knockback or whatever, it will feel like you're being rewarded for just being curious, rather than being, oh, you you need to travel 10-15 minutes just to get that one specific move.
That's something that sort of the other Yakuza games have the issue of, is like if you start with like 0, you might check out darts. You might go, oh, this is neat. Then you play Kiwami 1 and you're like, oh, it's the same darts again. And then, by the time you get to like 5, you might, if you have to, play a bit of darts, but for the most part, you're going to ignore it. And things like that kind of end up an issue because you've seen a minigame so many times that it doesn't matter if there's like something good behind it. A lot of the time, people will just skip it because they've experienced it already. But thankfully with Kenzan, you have all these entirely unique minigames that are a ton of fun to play, and they don't overstay their welcome. And, you want to get better at them and be rewarded with good moves to use.
Exactly. So for anyone who may not be familiar with it, just Google Kenzan Waterfall and make sure that there are no adults nearby, because you may have a weird conversation later on, but the minigame is fun. To kind of jumpstart a general overview of what Kenzan has to offer, we might as well start with the actual unique environments, because when I first got into it, and I believe you did one video where it was just walking around all of the individual quote-unquote districts, the weirdest thing about it was that a lot of them were kind of similar to what you see in Ishin. Like, for example, Gion appears in both Ishin and the original Kenzan, or something like Rakugai, or very specific interiors. But despite some of those similarities, there's a lot of very environments that are specific to Kenzan. So are there any in particular that immediately come to mind, or something specific about the way that the city is structured?
I would say Gion itself is obviously one of the focal points of the map. The issue is there's around 10 or so areas, of which 2 of them are main hubs and the rest, house a thing here and there, but are mostly for the occasional sub-story or a piece of training. But Gion itself is a very pretty location that during the day is sort of quiet, and the people, they're partying, but it's a lot more lower key. But then at night they're shooting off fireworks and it's all pretty and sparklers are going off. It's very much focused on how flashy the location is. It makes it a joy to traverse, especially in comparison to the other areas where, during the night you might see an occasional guy here and there, but it is as dead as can be because you're in the middle of a forest or whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of comparable to, but I feel like it's more extreme in the case of Kenzan, but something like traversing the main hub in Lost Paradise. Eden overnight has that flashy tendency, a lot of very deliberate color choices, color palettes that are more reminiscent of, let's say, PS2 era Yakuza design. So seeing that traditional design overlap here in the PS3 era, which I don't think we've seen that many instances of that type of visual design in Yakuza after this particular engine has run its course. Not to say that the other games are ugly or whatever, far from it, but there's a deliberance here that hasn't really returned, so that'll make it a lot more fun to actually traverse the various districts. And plus the fact that it's kind of like having 10 Shinseicho-sized cities that you can traverse to, and it's all part of one cohesive whole.
Yeah, I would compare it definitely to the Shinseicho, where it's kind of like you have 2 main hubs that have a big collection of the things you interact with, and a bunch of smaller ones that just kind of hang off and are in their own right really cool. Like a lot of them, there's a field, there's a farm, there's a mountain path, there's an area that's got this beautiful autumn color palette with different colored trees with their leaves falling, and a river. It's very, very, very pretty that you don't really see that kind of color pop in later games. A focus on nature kind of gets sidelined as the series goes on. There's occasional spots here and there, and Ishin has like 1 or 2 areas that, look very pretty. But as it goes on, they become more focused on, I guess, just having a consistent color palette, where you have, like, in Kamurocho, you would have your grays and then your bright colors, and then same for can be said for Sotenbori and other locations. But nature sort of takes a sideline later on, and it's sort of like the inverse of Yakuza 1 and 2, where your camera's kind of focused on pointing downwards, so you feel like you're a tiny rat in a maze. But with Kenzan, they naturally place all of the interesting things to see above you, where your camera would naturally be focused. So you get a lot of beautiful vistas to look out over.
Oh yeah, especially there's one particular area. I'm not sure if you can freely travel to it, but there's a certain fight that appears where you fight at a beach during sunset. And just that, I've rewatched a bunch of boss fights that some no damage content creators did of that fight just to look at how that environment looks like.
It's similar to one of the other locations in the game at evening. It's not the same one, but it's like almost the same. One notable thing about Kenzan that I think is really pretty is the evening sky. It creates a red glow around trees blocking the sun that just it really pops when you're looking up at the sky. It illuminates everything, and it feels it feels like a painting come to life. Just seeing there's a ton of areas that have tons and tons of unique things just out of bounds that you can look at. There's one area next to a temple that has a bunch of deer just hanging out and eating stuff just out of reach on the other side of a cliff, that looking at them, they all have unique animations, and they went through the effort of creating these models despite the fact that they're not close enough to you. And it's just things like that that make the area you're in feel alive and like it's a living place that you're just visiting.
When you consider all of that, I remember reading, like before Ishin dropped, there was talk of potentially having a Kenzan Kiwami or whatever, and they talked to, I believe, Yokoyama-san and another member of RGG about it. And when they actually said, because of the amount of content that's unique to this game, they might as well make an entirely new set of assets just to accommodate this, it really doesn't hit you that hard until you see just how in-depth this is, which, considering their yearly upload schedule back then, I have no idea how they made it this pretty and this efficient within basically another year's worth of content between Yakuza 2 and then having Kenzan and then immediately going into 3. Just how the hell?
It definitely, playing it and in its entirety and seeing all the things it has to offer, it's like comparable to 5. It doesn't have as many things as 5 does, but the amount of just unique assets they put into this game, especially in comparison to Yakuza 3, which for the most part has like a decent amount of reused things here and there, not when it comes to graphics, but when it comes to, move sets and icons and things like that. You can definitely feel that, because I believe 3 and Kenzan were being worked on generally around the same time. Kenzan came out before 3, but I think they were being developed around the same time. And it definitely feels like Kenzan got a lot more effort put into it. Not to say that 3 has no effort put into it, but that, of the two, they focused more on Kenzan. And if you play the two back to back, you can kind of feel that Kenzan had like a ton of love put into it. Because I believe Yokoyama, it was stated in one of the live streams, one of the ones where someone was dubbing over it, that I believe Kenzan itself was like Yokoyama's like love child, because he was really big into ancient Japanese history. So it was basically just the game he could put all of the stuff he loves into, and you can definitely feel that when you play it. It is a massive labor of love.
Yeah, and it's so experimental, for lack of a better word, because there's obviously some eccentricities that come natural to the territory of making Yakuza games, but whether it be even something as simple as how the story is paced, the fact that the prologue chapter happens at what we will refer to as present time for the setting of Kenzan, which is like 1605, I believe. And then you go over, I believe, 4 or 5 chapters of slowly building up to that point where you initially started the story, and it feels like you've seen the entirety of Musashi's life, but you still have so much to see, to the point where, I don't know, it covers so much, but it doesn't feel like it's dragging the pace, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's a bit similar to Yakuza 3, where that starts off with a hook to get you interested in what's going to happen in the story, and then reels time back a bit to show the setup to that, but decently longer and way more in-depth, where you have the prologue chapter, which sort of sets things up. It's like, here's the general start of the story, and then they run it back a couple of years and show you this entire long backstory for the main character that then eventually reaches the point at which the prologue started, and then you continue off that. There's not many other Yakuza games that try to do something similar. Most generally start where the story starts, but Kenzan does something unique and starts off with a hook and then goes back to show you the lead up to that hook.
Yeah, because we've seen, I believe the technical term, and I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, but in literature it would be in medias res, kind of just you dropped a person into whatever is happening at this point, very high octane moment, and then in the case of Yakuza, like we've had instances of something similar to this, because Ishin starts off with, I'm gonna use the actual Yakuza names and not the historical names, Kiryu meeting Watase, back when he and the Shinsengumi are just kind of breaking into a building, and then you see what happened before, or in Yakuza 6 where Kiryu is taking care of Haruto, etc. But the extent to which you see an actual steady build-up to that point, it's... Kenzan does it at its own pace that feels a lot more natural, and not like you're trying to rush to a point just so that the story could actually move forward.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate how it lets you settle in a little bit with the first chapter, shows these characters off, and then, you know, goes back in time to give the characters more time so you can understand, because you get a juxtaposition between Kiryu at present and Kiryu in the past to sort of go like, I wonder how he reached this point that he's currently at. And it makes you interested to see this journey happen. That, you know, a lot of other Yakuza games sort of do something similar, but not to the degree that Kenzan does.
Oh yeah. Okay, so now that we've done kind of a general overview of what the environment, what the narrative entails, we might as well go to probably the most important thing for a lot of people in these games, so the unique combat, because there's always been the debate on, okay, which game introduced the style switching and this and that, and then Kenzan is rarely really brought up in that conversation, because even though it has style switching, it's not what you would conventionally think of as that type of gameplay in the context of Yakuza. Technically, how many styles do you have available here?
You have dual sword style, you have single sword style, great sword style, short sword style, unarmed, and then unarmed Gion style, which is basically the same as unarmed, but you have access to a couple of unique weapons that you don't usually get access to. But really, dual sword and single sword and unarmed to an extent are fully fledged styles where they have a main combo, they have a bunch of side moves like a quick step attack or some sort of unique finisher. Meanwhile, great sword and short sword really only have a regular rush combo with no finisher and then one or two moves that make it more of a specialized, you know, you either use it for the heat action or you use it to clear out a crowd, but you don't do an entire section of the game using that weapon. Unarmed is kind of half and half, where it doesn't have a finisher either. It's just a very short rush combo, but it does have a huge repertoire of heat actions you can do in it, and a ton of ones to either disarm an opponent or use an opponent's sword against them. You use it in a situation where, you know, enemies attack you with a sword, being really annoying, and you just want to take it from them. That's a good opportunity to take it from them, and then they're unarmed. Then you can swap single sword and attack them and not have to worry about them blocking.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of random because I'm comparing it to Ishin Kiwami, because I haven't played the original yet, but it felt a lot more intuitive to switch between these individual styles depending on the situation rather than it did in Ishin Kiwami, because there it was like, oh yeah, the sword style just does everything. You need to break armor and this and that. It's kind of like you're nudged into it rather than thinking, oh yeah, every style could be doable here. It's just that I can choose anything that I want, so it makes the experimentation more fluid, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, with Ishin, that sort of has an issue that all of the style systems had up until, I'd say, around Judgment. Judgment started to do things good, where you don't really feel the need to move out of a style. You really just, you get into a fight and you pick, I'm gonna use Rush, or I'm gonna use Beast, or I'm gonna use, you know, Brawler or whatever, and then beat the fight that way. With the occasional, you know, I'm gonna use Beast to pick up a bike. Meanwhile, Kenzan, usually it's like single sword is really great for single opponents. Dual sword has, you know, one or two heat actions they can use for multiple opponents, which are useful for, you know, oh, I'm getting crowded, I need to swap to dual sword, and then you deal with them. And then, you know, you swap to unarmed if you want to either level the playing field or, you know, start picking up and using the weapons in the arena. you definitely feel the want to swap in between them all the time so that you can utilize the best parts of them. That makes the combat pretty fluid.
Yeah. But okay, I'm not sure about this in particular, because, okay, dual sword, love it. Single sword, love it. Even broadsword and short sword, but I can't wrap my head around why the basic unarmed style simply has no finisher. Because I kept spamming square and I'm like, wait, why isn't it doing anything? And after like 10 or 15 minutes, I'm like, really? Really? Why?
Yeah, it's definitely it's an odd duck of a style because unlike unarmed in Ishin, it doesn't really feel good to play up until a certain point, and even then, it doesn't do that much damage. But you know, it has finishers, it has a parry, it has things that make it fully fledged. Meanwhile, unarmed just has a couple hits. You know, you can punch a couple times, you can kick. Later, you can get like a charge kick, but really, that's it. It's really you use it a lot more for throws than anything because throws can gain a lot of heat in Kenzan. You really just you use it to either disarm an opponent or use an incredible amount of heat actions. Like you really use it to lead yourself to something else because really as a style, the combat itself for there's not that much going on, but it has a ton of different heat actions you can get for it that really just make it a style that you swap into to either throw someone that's blocking a lot or make use of one of the many heat actions it has.
Yeah, now that you put it that way, it's actually an interesting design choice. It's just that it's gonna take you a bit of time to get used to the fact that there's no finisher, but even without it, I honestly had more fun with Kenzan's unarmed style, you know, the half-frame stuff that I actually managed to try out, compared to, let's say, Kiwami 2. Because to me, the combat in Kiwami 2 is, and again, I'm probably gonna get hate for this, it's probably the weakest in the series, and I don't say that lightly. This one's just, again, very short, snappy, responsive. It kind of does everything that it does well. There is no blows to it, which I can appreciate.
Yeah, and also not to split hairs here with thinking Kiwami 2's combat is a bit weak. That one also sort of has the issue where a lot of the moves it has aren't as fun to use as they could be. A lot of the time with Kiwami 2's combat, you're going to be doing a lot of throws, you're going to be doing a lot of swapping into, you know, extreme heat, but no one's really out there doing charge kicks. No one's really out there landing every hit of a combo. Most of it'll be blocked, or, you know, your finisher may bounce off. And while Kenzan functionally has worse unarmed combat, it's definitely the things it does have are a lot of fun to use. Grabs are fantastic. Once you get enough upgrades for it, you can grab opponents and throw them into other opponents and knock those opponents over, and then just clear crowds out really easily.
Awesome. Like, I love crowd control options in general, so again, seeing it both in Kiwami 2 and in Kenzan, just as long as you're in an open environment, you're gonna have fun. But again, slight nudge to Kenzan, even though people may rag on it.
Yeah.
Right, so, beyond this point, we might as well just briefly touch on the boss fights, because we're not gonna get into spoilers, and if we do, again, the magic of post-editing stuff can fix it. But is there any particular fight that immediately stands out to you as like, okay, this is Kenzan at its peak?
I would definitely say there's a certain fight, I believe it's chapter 7 right at the start. It's the one on the beach you mentioned. That one, far and away, is always the one people go to for the soundtrack that plays during it. That's amazing. The fight itself has a bunch of interesting things going on with it. Things like that I appreciate a lot, and that's a great example of like, here's a simple boss fight, doesn't overstay its welcome, it's as hard as it needs to be, it's enjoyable, and you're like, man, that was a really fantastic boss fight that was just there in the middle of the game. I think yeah, that'll be the one I pick, is the one at the start of chapter 7.
Again, I really have to agree, because one of the standout songs from Ishin, and we are gonna have to bounce between Ishin here and there because it's kind of levels the playing field, so to speak, for people who may not be familiar with Kenzan, but there's a certain song for a boss fight in Ishin called La Muerte del Gobierno, and apologies to any Spanish speakers, I'm clearly not a native Spanish speaker, but it is very much reliant on passages on a classical guitar, and the song that you've here mentioned, which is, I believe, Baile con la Mariposa, is that, but somehow even more refined, even more ambiental, so to speak. It's a really tricky song to play, but I'm actually contemplating making a cover of it, because I play guitar on the side. It's just really, really cool, and with the setting and the stature of the individual you're going up against, it's just perfect.
It is a very beautiful song. A guitar cover of it would be quite nice. But yeah, no, the one in Ishin is definitely an homage to that song, which I appreciate that. Ishin doesn't really have many mentions of Kenzan because it's really trying to do its own thing. But I can appreciate that they honored that song by making a similar sounding one.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, we might as well mention, because it's evident that this game has a Majima counterpart, because, I mean, what's a Yakuza game without Majima, depending on who you ask.
Yeah.
This one, I find it hard to describe this particular version of him, because whether we're talking about the fight in the cave, after slight spoilers, he loses his eye, but then again, you kind of can't expect that, because it's fucking Majima. Something about it and the weapon that he uses, again, even when it comes to just all the fights we had against Majima, really stands out to me, because he's using like a chain, so to speak, with a needle on the end.
Chain with a sickle, yeah.
Props for the experimentation. I can't really do it justice in words, but that and kind of the brief fight that you have with him at the, let's just say, army HQ, so to speak, earlier on, they really do stand out to me, even though they're kind of more subdued in nature compared to some of the other boss fights.
Yeah, I would definitely agree on that. I really appreciate how they took Majima and sort of transformed him into something sort of new. They do a pseudo Yakuza 0 thing by giving, for once, a little bit of backstory to Majima, which I appreciate that this is the first time they really like focused on leading up to Majima. But there's something special about his Kenzan design that really takes all of the nice things about his main series design and sort of transforms it into here's the samurai version, which is something that the Ishin version doesn't try to do, and it's okay for it not to try to redesign the wheel, but it's something that's sort of lacking where the Ishin version is sort of, it's just that's Majima, he's in a new outfit, it's just kind of Majima as you know him, but then Kenzan does something new. It takes the character and transforms him into some new beast, which I really, really appreciate that they did that.
Yeah, and they even double down on the humor behind it, because there's chances that if you're in the Yakuza community and you're active on YouTube, you're probably recommended the Kenzan video of Majima falling off the roof. I still replay that. I haven't reached that point in the story in the KHH subtitle playthrough, but it's just funny. Google it, it's hilarious.
It is a very, very silly clip. Even in the context of the story, it just kind of happens. And it's like, it is definitely something that you like belt out a laugh when you see it in the game.
Alright. We might as well do a brief overview of what a remaster versus a remake could offer in terms of potential. Or, first off, if it was up to you, putting aside story-related aspects or the age of the gameplay, the perceived age, would you prefer to have a straight-up remaster or a Kiwami-style remake of the game?
If it was between a remaster or a Kiwami-style remake, I believe I'd probably go with a remaster, because part of the appeal of Kenzan is where it's placed in the series, how old it is, how many unique things it does that a remake couldn't quite get across. It's sort of a similar thing where Yakuza 2, sort of the appeal of it is how rough and raw a lot of the sound design and feel of the gameplay is, that a remake can't quite emulate without just entirely replicating. If it were a full-blown remake, I think I could get used to it. It's definitely something that if I saw it announced at a summit, I'd probably lose all the blood in my face at the first sighting. But it's something that I think, if I saw it and I saw they were doing right by the game and either doing something new or perfectly emulating what was there, I could definitely appreciate, because there's a little-known Kenzan Pachinko game that has entirely new animations, has an entirely new story. It's stuck in a Pachinko game, but they basically just take the story of Kenzan and then anime-ify it, where everything's turned up to like 100. Kiryu's fighting demons. He's climbing up golden towers. All this crazy stuff is going on. That's the kind of thing that I could see that if a remake happened like that, I could be 100% behind, because I would love for them to finally do a Yakuza game where, with no holds barred, they're going as crazy as they want. They're not restricted by anything. I could get behind that. But if it was a remaster or a remake, I'd probably prefer a remaster. As long as they do it right, don't mess up any of the 60 FPS things. Don't make don't make turtle racing impossible, because it's 60 FPS and you have to lower the game to 15 to beat it. As long as those bugs are excluded, I would be 100% behind something like that.
I definitely agree with all of that, because, oh my god, we're not gonna get into the technical side of it, but once you realize how easily those things can be messed up, like, when people rag on the blocking in Yakuza 3, which I personally don't see as much of a problem, it is really just about the refresh rate and the fact that, oh yeah, just putting stuff to 60 doesn't fix everything, and, man, having that in a game like Kenzan would really be a shame, because just everything about it flows so beautifully, because not just the frame rate, but also the general hardware that it has, the design choices are very much a sign of the times. It's one of those games that you really only see being done justice on native hardware. And it's kind of weird to me how, again, putting the historical aspect aside, which we will get into, it's kind of weird that our community doesn't really seem as vocal about the aspect of retro gaming, or like, for example, having the PS3 HD remasters of Yakuza 1 and 2 making their way on modern consoles. Everyone's more interested in remakes rather than some attempt at preserving the originals, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, especially in comparison to groups like the Silent Hill fan base, which are very much focused on, if you want to play the game, you have to play it on an original PS2 or PS1. You have to play it on CRT. If you're doing anything else, you're not doing it right. Especially when there are people like that are vocal about, you have to do it almost identical to how it was originally released. It is a bit odd that a lot of the people in the Yakuza community are so focused on bright and new things, and not so much, preserving the roots where everything started as much.
Yeah, exactly. Well, oh yeah, just to kind of get back into that, I had no idea about the pachinko machine, because we had another series that I adore. I don't think I've spoken about it on the channel, but Devil May Cry. I believe the fourth game had something like a pachinko equivalent, and again, between that and I believe MGS3 had something similar, like, oh yeah, here's fixed up cutscenes, here's all the flashiness that you may need for a remake, but we're not gonna do a remake, so yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it's a bit funky when some of those pachinko games have so much effort put into them, and they're pachinko though. You're watching 100 metal balls go down a slot thing, and you have all your money ripped out of your hand, and you're seeing the coolest animations you've ever seen in your life flash by at 100 miles per hour. It is definitely a shame, because I do think the Kenzan stuff they showed off there's a couple uploads of some of the cutscenes of the Kenzan Pachinko game. Just looking at it, it's like, I want to play that game. I want to play a game where you bet on sumo fights and you cheat in horse racing and you gotta save a doll from an elephant or whatever happens. Things like that. I want to see that game where everything's absolutely insane, and you're putting your life on the line to save a doll for a kid fighting off like a giant demon. That's definitely something that 7, I think, starts to capture again, where you have all these crazy fights against pieces of machinery. It's something similar to that I think I do think would be really cool if they finally did.
Well, I mean, considering how crazy our modern community is, chances are that if word gets out on that actual pachinko machine, that someone's gonna do, yeah, we can do that, and then puts it in either Yakuza 3 or something. Because I've seen someone made like either a randomizer or something where they inserted, I believe, Musashi's or Kenzan Kiryu's dual sword fighting style in the ultimate battles in Yakuza 3. I have no idea how they did it, but if they could do that, then maybe they can do their wonders with this as well.
Modders are crazy. There's one modder that he's a friend of a friend, but he's working on this is public information, this isn't me leaking anything. He is working on a Yakuza 3 multiplayer mod, which I had the fortune of testing out. But it's starting to get refined a little bit. There's some uploads of people fighting at the same time. If you can do multiplayer in a game that was like designed to be single player, I believe you could do anything. You can fight crazy people in the sky doing the most insane heat actions you've ever seen. People will get to it eventually, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna put either in the description or the top comments. I'm gonna leave a link to that multiplayer, or rather the gameplay of the multiplayer, because I've actually rewatched that maybe like 10 minutes before we got onto this call, and I was just bursting out laughing over the dual Tamashiro and then Kiryu being in the air, and I love it. I wish we got
the utter insanity of it being like an unrefined mod was something very enjoyable when we played. Watching, you'd be walking down the street and all of a sudden you see Kiryu coming towards you and you get scared for a second, thinking like someone broke into your game. It is a ton of fun.
Yeah, sentient AI, and then it really does get into that kind of old school mentality, because there's something about those games, like either early PS3 or late PS2, that just has that joy factor to it that can't really be replicated, and I feel like that multiplayer is just the peak of that.
Yeah, it's definitely older PS3 games definitely are a lot more video gamey than more recent games are. More recent games are a little bit more focused on being realistic, which I don't have an issue with, because a lot of the time they're realistic and video gamey, but I appreciate earlier games that are just like, you hop in and the game knows it's a video game, and it's not trying to present itself like it's, the most realistic thing you've ever seen, and it's just like, you're here to have a good time, and I definitely think the multiplayer mod encapsulates that really well.
Yeah, I appreciate that the most when it comes to specifically Japanese game developers and character action games. They're not afraid of being video gamey while also having actual emotional points, and Yakuza, even more so with the Ichiban saga, or whatever we can call it, it really tips into that particular territory of the human brain, and it just works out wonderfully. Like, we've seen that you can fight a shark in Infinite Well, so that tells you everything.
Yeah, they're definitely they're embracing that chaotic video game nature that especially games like Dragon Quest were so focused on.
I actually haven't played it yet. I may have to after, the 17th Ichiban game, where by the end it will probably be just references to, I don't know, oh, this happened in Dragon Quest 7, and you have no idea about it, and blah blah blah. Anywho.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the people who may be familiar with Kenzan and some aspects of its story, they probably know that there are certain less than savory aspects about it. And if you would be so kind as to kind of go over some of the general aspects that may make this game a bit more troublesome to carry over into 2023.
I've definitely been wanting to, ever since I got into Kenzan and I understood the story and I took time to research things, I've been meaning to make a video for a long time talking about this. There's two important things to note about the certain plot point in Kenzan that everyone, I'm sure, is plenty aware of, and that's that Haruka in that game is a maid. She's what's known as I believe it's a Camaro,
Yeah.
which no relation to Camarocho, believe it or not, just unfortunate. But she's what's known as a Camaro, which were maids that worked at brothels, and they would work as apprentices. They would run errands, because usually the courtesans, as they're called at the brothels, would be restricted to either live within the brothel or in a nearby house. So the Camaros would be sent out to collect presents or groceries or set up dates for their courtesan. And it's important to note that in the plot of Kenzan, the fact that Haruka is a Camaro is important to the plot. It's not the focus of the plot, but it's the kind of thing that you couldn't surgically remove out and have the rest of the game be the same. It's very integral. I would compare it a little bit to the idle stuff from Yakuza 5, where it kind of doesn't know what it wants to do, where it's presenting it as a little gross at times, and other times it's like, this is an awesome job to have. And that's definitely comparable, especially considering the fact that Kenzan doesn't try to present this lifestyle as a good thing. One of the first cutscenes of the game, literally the first cutscene, like a minute in, I believe, is a bunch of children being brought into Gion to be sold, and they're crying about it because they're not going to see their families because it's I believe it's indentured servitude because their parents would sign a contract to have them work as a camero in Gion, and all the money they got working there would be sent back to their family. Kenzan takes multiple approaches to explain that this isn't a good thing. As I said, the cutscene that sort of shows that when Haruka, because one of the plot points is that Haruka becomes a camero, pay Kiryu to kill someone for her.
Yeah.
And when she finally joins and gets paid, she hands the money over to Kiryu, and Kiryu just tells her, you should take this money and give it back and hopefully leave this job because being in Gion isn't a good thing. No one should want to be here unless they're, partaking in what's going on here. No one should want to work here. And he explains that there's a lot of people who become a camero and think to themselves, man, when I get the chance, I'm gonna get out of here as soon as I can. And then eventually they grow accustomed to the lifestyle and don't want to leave. And he tells her, you don't want to live like this. And then, Haruka refuses and is like, no, I want to pay you. And the game doesn't really focus on it too much. There's one certain moment in the sort of the middle of the game where someone is like breaking the rules of the brothel and is getting handsy with Haruka, but the game does not present that as a good thing. That guy is depicted as the villain. Everyone around him is acknowledging how gross and creepy he is. The game, and the important thing, does not present this as a good thing. It presents it as bad and not a lifestyle. There's a sub-story where a guy is trying to buy a camero and he's presented as a weirdo. The game doesn't, want people to do these things. It's showing these things existed, it happened. Which I think a lot of people don't want to spoil themselves in the story or are just repeating what other people have said because they assume, if 100 people say this thing is in Kenzan, surely it has to be. It's not that everyone could be wrong.
Exactly.
Because I explained in the wrong light can sound very bad, and it is bad. The game knows it's bad.
Yeah.
But it's not as bad as people think it is. It's very much something that I think has been blown out of proportion, mostly because it takes, more than 10 words to explain. You can't really go, Haruka is a maid, because it's like there's more going on there than just Haruka is a maid. There's more stuff that's happening. But yeah, I definitely advise everyone who watches this video, you see someone being incorrect about it, you can inform them. You can link them this video or the follow-up video, or link to the cutscenes on YouTube because they've been up there for a long time. And then the people who watch this video, you can also go on to the cutscenes on YouTube and watch them and learn a bit more yourself. To get your own point. It's okay if you don't think it'd be good in a modern game, but as long as you're knowledgeable, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, exactly.
That sort of brings me on to something that's sort of like most people probably won't agree with this, but I think, I don't want to say RGG is greedy because that's not true. They've done a lot of things that have been focused on, like, this is not going to make money, but this is for the people who care about it.
Exactly.
But I definitely think a bit of the motivation behind it could be, a remaster of Kenzan. If you look at that in comparison to remake costs more to make, but a remake that gets a lot of eyes on it, especially if it's good. A lot of people, they want to play it, they want to check it out, worth a ton of money. Doing a remaster, a lot more people they're gonna scoff at it or turn their head and go, I'm not interested. So I definitely think money could be a motivator, which I don't, I'm not gonna chastise them for their business. First and foremost, money, obviously. But I definitely think I would love for I think the game's like Medieval. There was a remake of that. It's like a PlayStation game.
Yeah.
That one of the bonuses, I'm not saying it should be this way, but the fact was one of the bonuses in it was like if you collected something, you got the ability to play the original game in the game.
Oh man.
Which
awesome.
I think I'm not saying you should have to do like minigame completion to get original Kenzan or whatever, but I do think it would be really cool business practice to release the game bundled with the original, because then I cry for the translators having to translate 2 games before release, because that'd be hell, and I don't envy that position. But I do think something like that, I feel like no one is ever going to look at it and go, why would you throw in the original game? They look at that and go, I'm getting 2 games for like $70, $80 or whatever. That's a steal. That's fantastic. I'd love to pay that much to get 2 games, the new one and the original. I think I could definitely abide by that. I think that'd be awesome. Probably not going to do it, but you know what? I'm sitting here, thumb held high, hoping.
Same here. Because I mean, looking at it, yeah, that would be very much wishful thinking. But then keep in mind, this is RGG we're talking about. They do a lot of things in a non-traditional manner, and that's why most of us very much adore them. And when it comes to something like that proposition, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the franchise Ratchet and Clank.
Somewhat familiar.
So one of the coolest things about those games to me was that in some of the PlayStation 2 games, you had a separate level that you could unlock only by doing everything in the game. And what you could do in this secret level would be directly interact with all of the cut content. And I don't know, vehicles that used to be drivable would be accessible there, or minigames that were cut, models. You had like notes from many of the developers elaborating on the development process. So seeing an addition like that into something like, for example, in Judgment, I know this is gonna sound all over the place, but there's a point to it. In Judgment, there's this whole project on the side where you can finance a random building that's called GI Labs or something like that. And I keep thinking, if RGG had enough time, they could have used that type of building or that type of project as kind of a housing point for a lot of the cut content that they don't feature. Because as memeable as the aspect of Ryu Ga Gotoku can be, there's actually a ton of stuff that they don't bring back. So even something as simple as that, maybe at a lower frame rate, but just a playable version of Kenzan in a Kenzan Kiwami, that really sounds like something they could do, especially now that they have more funding, which Yokoyama mentioned in, I believe, the first behind-the-scenes video, now that he's head of the studio. Between that and how they seem to be taking more time apart between the larger scale titles, it might actually happen. Copium / whatever, but it would be really cool. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
Hint, nudge, nudge.
Okay, so we might as well do a brief... I feel like I've repeated this 70 times by now. As you can tell, I'm not that familiar with emceeing a conversation, but doing an overview of the historical setting and terminology, which I remember you mentioned how that was a huge improvement from like comparing OG Ishin to Ishin Kiwami, because it had a bit of a glossary on the side, and there is actually a lot of overlap in, for example, the setting of the actual game, putting aside the design of the levels. The fact that Kenzan basically shows you the beginning of the historical period for which you see the ending of in Ishin was one of the weirdest correlations that I could have thought of, because when you know about the Tokugawa and you met the shogun and this and that in Ishin, going back to the story of Kenzan feels a lot more familiar, even though I myself didn't know anything about the history. So is there anything specific about the historical aspect that you think should be pointed out?
I think it's a case where, because Kenzan and Ishin both have the feature that certain words would be highlighted green and a glossary would show up. Kenzan also has that because some of the words used are ancient in comparison to modern day Japanese. Mm-hmm. I definitely think, if they did a remaster, change some, highlight, Camaro and Courtesan so people can be made aware of what those are, because I don't believe they're highlighted in Kenzan. Things like that would be nice to highlight, because, it'd be really useful to look at it and be able to immediately figure out what it means. But yeah, no, when it comes to like historical setting, Ishin kind of has a problem where you need to know a lot about the caste system, how Japanese social hierarchy works, certain things with history that even if you take the time to get all the, I believe they're like called memoirs in Ishin Kiwami, yes, that explain these things, you have to sit down and read through pages and pages of text. That's not as interesting as it could be, which is like an issue that's really only localized to Ishin and not Kenzan, because Kenzan, for the most part, stays away from a lot of governmental things. There's some slight mentions here and there, but it's like the ruler of Japan did this recently, and it's like, I know how a ruler works. I don't need I don't need a glossary on that.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, it definitely doesn't have the issues that Ishin has, because it's so focused on this story of Miyamoto Musashi, which is like pretty simple to get across. You don't really need too much like terminology to understand things. There's really the only thing that's hindered a bit is here and there will be there's a couple sub stories that are focused on Japanese myths. That the punchline is kind of a bit funky if you don't know the story. Like, for example, there's one where two bandits are pretending to be a prince and his bouncer from a classic story, and they start arguing over the history of the myth, going like, I bet you don't know who did this. And it's like, yeah, I do. I've read the story. This guy did that. Things like that you won't exactly get if you're not familiar with the story. Things like that would be really nice if, like, you went to the sub-story in the sub-story list and you could click it and there was a drop-down that explained, here's the history of the myth. That's really the only issues when it comes to, bringing it to the West. A lot of the stuff is like, most people are aware of how samurais work. Most people are aware of these things here and there that you don't really need explanation for. You can just kind of get in and understand everything that happened.
Yeah, I mean, Kenzan in a lot of ways does feel like a bit of an easy way, or rather an easier way, for people to get into that type of setting than Ishin, because, like you said, it's a lot more character-oriented, rather than, oh yeah, these individuals are part of a greater ploy that will change the course of history. Here it's like, you're Miyamoto Musashi, you meet specific people with specific intentions, and the way it all kind of starts and ends is simple, but it is very satisfying. Even though it may be a bit of a tearjerker here and there, but yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely, I would compare it to how Yakuza 3 has some government stuff going on in it, but it's sort of the backbone of it. It's not as in focus as like Ishin, though Yakuza 3 has like the plot chapter that's like it's all in focus. That makes just things more confusing. But when it comes to Kenzan, it's here and there, and it's not particularly bad, but not as confusing as Ishin is, where with Ishin it's like, X group is enemies with Y group, and Z group is like mutual friends with both of them, but they're also in a war now, and then this guy in the government is doing something, and you have to remember like 800 long Japanese names, and you start to forget who characters are. Like at a certain point when you're playing Ishin, you will just go like, Majima's talking right now, Mine's talking right now. You're not going, Saito Hajime is talking right now. No, you're probably just going to say Ryoma or Kiryu.
That's one of the things that I love about Kenzan, because specifically, like, obviously some of the characters have dual names, but the ones that you normally see them being abbreviated as, like, for Miyamoto Musashi, he is called Kiryu Kazumanosuke more often than not, and for Majima, he's Majima Gorohachi. Just the fact that they only add like a tiny word after the main name, it had me bust out laughing, but again, a lot more beginner friendly, and I'm so glad that we don't need to have if you know the meme of Yokoyama explaining a Yakuza plots to hostesses, I'm glad that we don't have to do that type of, extending 70,000 lines to explain why the societal aspect works in this way and why it doesn't elaborate on a character development for this guy and blah blah blah. Just, it's very simple, but it has the depth if you actually look for it, and that's one of the best things about it.
It's definitely a thing where, like, with Ishin, you kind of need to do that. You have to draw a circle around like 800 portraits, and then like there are a couple characters that show up and have like a couple lines and don't do anything. So you're like, okay, and then the florist shows up. He has like 2 lines. He's just up on the board. Like if you have one of those, I believe it's Yakuza 3 that has the big profile board that lists factions and who Kiryu doesn't like this guy, but this guy's friends with Kiryu, and so on. It's definitely something like that where like the florist would be in the top right in a box with no arrow pointing to anyone, no relation at all. He's just kind of there. It's definitely, when it comes to Kenzan, like every character for the most part serves a purpose, and they're pretty easily memorable because it's newer games. Well, not newer games, but more so around the Yakuza 5 era, they got really focused on, let's have a big cast with a lot happening, which in some cases works with 5 because you're playing different characters you know, you're focused on a small group of people with that character. Meanwhile, with Ishin, it's sort of like, here's a large cast of characters, and you constantly have to interact with most of them, and so you're constantly like, this guy has the face of a Wano, but I don't remember his name. Like, do I like this guy, or is he a villain? I forgot. Things like that like Kenzan doesn't really do, because it's focused on like, here are your characters, allegiances will change. This guy might turn out to be a villain, or might turn out to be, you know, a good guy. Things like that make it so the interesting stuff is not the amount of characters, it's how these characters change in the story.
I love the fact that you made the correlation with Yakuza 5, because I'm currently working on like a multi-hour video on that. I have no idea when this video will drop, because dear god, I've only been working on that particular video. But the thing that you just mentioned, like, okay, let's say two characters are talking and they mention a random name, and you're like, okay, who the hell is this guy? You go on the wiki and then you see a spoiler for it. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue where like there's so much to keep track of, and it's so easy to get spoiled on things that it's like there are a ton of characters, especially in 5, that like show up and have like one line. There's like one guy, I believe it's in Saijima's chapter, that appears right at the end, and then he appears at the end of the game.
Oh,
and he only has like a handful. Yeah, him.
Oh god.
I could never tell you his name in a million years. Yeah, that's sort of an issue where it's like, when he shows up at the end, you look at him and you're like, do I know this guy? I think I know this guy, because they only pan it to him for a second. You're like, is this guy good? Like at a certain point, the game just needs to start telling you, this guy's your friend, and you're like, oh, okay, now I know how to react. Yay, it's my friend! But 5 at least has the luxury of a lot of these stories. It only starts to fall apart towards the end. You can keep track of characters in individual stories because you're focused on that individual story. Then when you get to the end, they start referencing things back in chapter 1 that's been like 100 hours, 100, you know, playthroughs of Taiku no Tatsujin earlier. Like, you're not going to remember any of that stuff. That might as well have been a different game.
Literally.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing where like Kenzan benefits from less characters is a good thing. You know, they're starting to do that with newer games where like focus on a smaller cast so that when things happen, you're like, no, I know who this guy is. I've spent years with him, instead of, I met this guy 5 minutes ago.
I love the fact, like, you can't see it, I'm currently in tears just how accurate that is. Because while I was going through my like 4th or 5th playthrough of Yakuza 5, I just wish that they implemented, you know how they have the title cards when a character is introduced?
Yeah.
I hope, or rather in Yakuza 5, I hope someone mods in a reintroductory title card. So for someone
yeah,
like
it's another introductory title that's like, it's like, you know, whatever, you know, this is Kitakata, you know, leader of the Kitakata family. Under that, he's your friend as far as you know. He showed up a bit earlier. You might have thought something happened to him, but he's okay.
Yeah.
He is amazing at cooking or whatever.
Exactly. To kind of round all of this up in a way, okay, let's say, for the sake of an argument, that RGG actually goes the Kiwami route. I personally wouldn't be too much into it. Not to say that the remakes are bad, but oh boy, there's definitely been a very specific trend going on. So, if they went kind of that route, I'd argue that there actually wouldn't need to be as much new content being made. Let's say if it was once again done in Unreal Engine, because, like, off the top of my head, I remember a number of very specific, prominent areas from Kenzan actually being one-for-one shown in Ishin. Like, for example, there's a bridge in Ishin when you go from that version of Gion into, I believe, Rakugai or Rakunai, and just going into that, it's literally the exact same thing. Or, for example, the Shogi Parlor, where you go when you meet some random forger that gives you an entry pass to get into some place, or the house of like this one girl named Ukiyo. There's so many things that I've seen in Ishin, and I had no idea that they actually came from Kenzan.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's a couple heat actions in Ishin that, like, there's one specifically that I didn't like them reusing because I liked it being special in Kenzan. There's one you get basically at the end of the game. Last moment, you can run around. You get access to, unique heat action that you have to, like, kind of work your butt off to get access to. And it's not all that good, but it's like, it's cool because it's like, wow, that's unique. And then in Ishin, it's just like it's just this one exists. It's like no, you can't do that. That's the cool one. You can't treat my heat action that way. That's sort of how I felt. A funny thing to note, not to cut you off.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Is that basically every weapon in Ishin, outside of there's like the one you get from fighting a Mon, and there might be one other one here and there, like some of the sledgehammers, some of the whatever. Almost all of the swords in the game are straight up, one for one, basically no changes, just taken from Kenzan and changed. And it's, it's crazy that like a lot of those just show up again, and it's like, oh, it's neat that they're like, finding a reason to reuse them. But it's also the case of like, some of those were short swords in Kenzan, and they would pair with other swords. And so when I was playing Ishin, it's like, what would be considered an endgame sword in Kenzan would be the first upgrade in a chain that leads to one that would be like when you get at the start of the game. And it like, looking at that, it broke my brain, because it's like, no, that should be the good one. That's the one that I worked hours to get. And you play Ishin, it's like, oh no, that's like, you can get that one for like 2 Rio. That's like nothing.
Jesus Christ, I have no idea about that. But okay, wait, to kind of briefly go back, the one unique heat action that you mentioned, I'm pretty sure there was a random clip that I've seen where someone said, okay, the guy needs to be below 25%, you need to be below 75%, you need to approach a ledge. It's kind of, there was this weird large scale guy that goes up against you. Is that the heat action, or is
no? Because that was a boss QT in Kenzan. That was notable for being incredibly hard to find. I didn't mention it. I probably should have when we did introductions. But I've played Kenzan 20 times over from start to finish, doing most of the completion. It's very much, it's a game that like I enjoyed. I do one run through and it's like, okay, I did all sword completion. Next run through I do like, okay, I did all sword and so on, and I'd start to learn the game more and more, and like, don't do that negatively affects you, so on and so forth. But yeah, no, that was one that was notable because it was the requirements were so absurd, where it's like the boss needs to be at low health, you need to be at near max health, you need to be running at a specific part of the stage. No, there's one that to do it you have to complete. Komaki's ancestor shows up in Kenzan, as he does in Ishin.
Yeah.
And he teaches you a bunch of unarmed moves, and then there's a trainer you speak to that teaches you a bunch of sword moves. And the cool thing you learn is that both of them know each other. So there ends up being like, after you completed both of their training and you're in the final chapter, there's like a final showdown where you watch like, this is the move that Komaki has kept hidden for all these years, and it's one of the most dangerous moves there is for the style. And it's one where you unlock a heat action earlier in the game where you can disarm a sword opponent and take their sword from them, which shows up in Yakuza 3 and 4 as one that just knocks the enemy over, but you don't take their sword. In Kenzan, you get an upgraded version of that, where when you're at low health against any opponent that's using a sword and you're unarmed, you take their sword from them and stab it back into them as they're knocked down. And it's so cool because, it's one of the last heat actions you get. It's super unique. It has specific requirements. It feels like this is the ultimate heat action in the game. And then in Ishin and Kiwami 1, actually, in Legend Style, it's Legend Style and Kiwami 1 has a couple heat actions that the game doesn't tell you about that exist. I don't know why the game doesn't tell you about them, but they're there. And one of them is the aforementioned sword one, where you take it from them and stab it back into them. But it's just a basic sword move, and it's like, seeing it in the context of Kenzan, it's like, wow, that's cool. And then seeing it in Ishin, it's like, it's just another sword heat action. It's just another one you can do against opponents. It makes me a little sad that it's like, when things get reused to be worse than they were originally. Like there's in Yakuza 2 in Kenzan, doing all of the heat actions in the game unlocks you the final heat action, which is this like, I'm sure tons of people who are watching this video have probably seen it, where Kiryu, swings his hand back and slaps a dude so hard he flips 3 times over. And like, it looks, it is the most like, sit down, buddy, I'm not fighting you anymore. It does absurd damage into it. It does like 2 health bars. It is the ultimate heat action. In Kenzan, it does slightly less, and it has a bit of funky requirements to use it. And then In 3, it's remade into Ultimate Essence, which is the one where Kiryu like flips his hands around and like backhands a dude, and it's marginally lamer than just like a full-on slap. And then in 5, it becomes just like a low health punch you do that's like not even remotely as cool. And I think that's something that's like a bit of a shame when you see reused assets and they're lamer than they were originally. It's like, if you're gonna reuse it, make it awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Improve upon it. Jeez.
Yeah.
I mean, interesting that you should point that out, because there's another video on your channel, because I had no idea that that was a thing, and only then did it actually click in my head. The concept of what you dubbed dynamic finishers in the PS2 games.
Mm-hmm.
It's another one of those examples, like, there's secret stuff in the games, but again, I've played through the PS2 games so many times, I didn't know that it was a deliberate thing.
I love that kind of stuff. I get giddy with the joy. I start, jumping like a little kid, bumping my fists in the air when I find out, like, did you know that if you, equip this healing item during this section, you get a silly hat or something like that. That's like some obscure little detail that doesn't even remotely matter. There's one interaction in Yakuza 5 where some people are now a little bit aware of this, where you can go on a date with the lady that you play Chohan with.
Yeah, I know that. Oh my god.
It nets you nothing. The requirements to finish it properly are like, you have to let her win roulette 3 times, which is like next to impossible because it's roulette. But it is an entire interaction that's in the game that like 2 people are aware of, and that kind of stuff to me is like, I will wake up at the dead of night, hop onto my computer just to see that like there's a crumb that's like secret that you can get access to that most people don't know about. Yeah, things like that. Earlier Yakuza games had tons of stuff like that, especially Yakuza 5 and like 2. Kenzan has some things like that. Like, one thing I bet you didn't know is in Yakuza 3, I think only Yakuza 3, if you equip a baseball weapon, not a baseball bat with nails, but any of the other ones, like Blue Dragon bat or Patriarch's bat or whatever. Okay. If you equip that and then go play baseball, that is your baseball bat model in batting. It has no effect on how well you play, as far as I could tell, but it's there. They put in the effort to make it so your baseball bat changes, and it's like insane to me that there are people who sat on this game, designing these little things that like very few people are aware of. That kind of stuff to me is like that is what I started my channel for. Is I want people to see that stuff, because I know there's a ton of people who will enjoy like small little things that 99.999% of people are completely oblivious to.
Man, I genuinely love that. At the same time, like, okay, I wasn't familiar with the Yakuza 3 thing, and if it was actually a stat boost, I probably would be crying at this point in time, because imagine how easier the fucking minigame
yeah, how much easier the batting minigame would be if your baseball like hit twice as harder.
I mean, but that's so cool. Like, okay, major props for revealing this, and to anyone listening, your channel is full of this stuff. Like, Kenzan apparently had an iteration of Mew shoes, but they were a green item or something.
Yeah, they were, they're like bird shoes or no, nightingale sandals is what they are. Right. And the original description for them read like, you would get it the same way as you get the Mew shoes in the game, which is like invention completion. Which I want to mention inventions as a system real quick, because I think they're awesome.
Go.
There's a guy you can speak to in Gion that invents things for you. You just go up to him and he's like, I need these 2 items and something sticky. And you have to go like look for something sticky to, add into the mixture. But then you can like you can in Ishin, you can craft basically a stamina and spark where it completely refills your health and heat, and you can just buy it whenever you want from the medicine shop. Stuff like that's really cool. But not to derail myself, but the Nightingale sandals were originally, instead of mewing, the shoes would like chirp when you walked. I was considering recreating that in the video, but I couldn't find like a good short chirp sound effect. But yeah, no, it's super cool. All that stuff is super interesting. I'm working on part 2 of the Kenzan cut content, and there's actually a boss fight, or at least a boss fight phase, that was cut out of Kenzan. Like, it's technically in the files, it's in between one of the final fights and another one of the final fights, where like the fights in the game are numbered, so you can tell when an iteration of a fight has happened, because you'll go from like, this is fight 206 to this is fight 210. It's like, okay, so you guys did like 4 iterations before that weren't as good, and then you finished it. And this one is numbered right in between, and it's just a fight against a specific character that the original idea is you would fight him, and then he would flee, and then you'd do some other fights, and then you'd fight him again. And stuff like that's super interesting, because it's like, you guys planned something else. You guys had a different idea. And stuff like that's like, wow, I want people to see this, because this is like super cool. RGG, please don't get mad at me. If you guys are a little bit more open about this stuff, I wouldn't have to do this. It's cool. I want people to see it.
I mean, exactly. Okay, I'm gonna mute this very next sentence, but I'm just kind of curious because I'm familiar enough with how the finale plays out. Is it related to the fight with Tenkai or the fight with Sasaki?
It's related to the fight with Tenkai, yes. The original idea. This is just put like a spoiler section here, just big words on the screen or whatever, because it just, finale spoilers, notable. I think the original idea was that you would beat Kojiro, Sasaki Kojiro, and then Tenkai would show up, and then you would fight him 1v1 on the beach.
Right.
Because the file itself doesn't work quite right anymore, because it's a beach fight with Tenkai, but his moveset doesn't work. He has a unique like starting animation, but like he doesn't have an actual combo and he can't attack you back. But I think the original idea is you would fight him on the beach for whatever reason, and then he would flee up the mountain. You chase after him and fight him on the cliffside. And my guess is that originally you would fight him on the beach, go through the door, and then immediately transition to the cliffside. But then they thought, that's probably a bit of a lame ending, so they're like, let's build it up more. Because one thing I want to note is that RGG have been quoted multiple times. I need to find a source for this so I can put it in the video. But they've been quoted when talking about Kenzan that one of the things they want to change the most is the ending, which I've always found shocking, because the ending is one of the best parts of the entire game. It's so crazy and awesome, and so much stuff happens. And I've always wondered, like, why would they want to change the ending? The ending's good. And it's like, now that I think about it, it's like maybe they had an original plan, didn't do it, did this new one, and then like weren't happy with it, and now they want to do the original intention, which like, that would be cool if they talked about it, if they maybe said these things sometimes, that like, yeah, we had a different idea for like the final fight in Yakuza 3 or whatever. That was going to be crazy. You're going to fight a helicopter or something like that. Like, that's like, if you guys talked about that, I'd want to hear it. That's cool.
Jesus. Like, I'm pretty sure that there's one random obscure interview with either Yokoyama or Nagoshi or anyone from like 2010 where they probably mentioned it briefly at like an earlier iteration of Kamuto Radio or somewhere on the official channel, but dear gods, going through that would be impossible.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the official channel only goes back to Yakuza 3, and even then, it's like, yeah, the Yakuza 3 videos are mostly just like hostess stuff, and then you jump to Yakuza 4 and Kurohyo and so on. I think probably a lot of it is on like Nico Nico Doga or one of those Japanese YouTube-like sites. And I can guarantee you 90% of it has been deleted off the internet, or it's at like 144p and impossible to comprehend anything happening in it.
Oh my god. We'll get to digging. And again, if someone sees this, maybe they will be, I have actually salvaged this back in 2008 and I've been waiting for this moment.
I've been waiting for someone to, I have 18 copies of it, and I've been waiting it to like send it to like some journalist or something, but this is my time to shine.
Yeah, we have business emails, by the way. We have actual official documentation, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I imagine they'll be in the description. I think I have mine linked to my YouTube account, which YouTube account will obviously be in the description.
Yeah.
So it's like, anyone got something cool to show me, I'm here. I'd like to see it.
Yeah, especially. Because, I mean, when you have a content creator like you, or for example, like Leon or someone, there's a ton of people in the community who want to see that stuff, but they can't do the digging themselves. So we'll do the heavy lifting, we'll do the presentation and all of that. So feel free to do your charms, and we'll hopefully make good content out of it so you can enjoy it.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough that I became friends with a guy called Oddities, who he's the one who's been working on Leon recently played his Ultimate Battles mod that had Musashi in it and Yagami or whatever.
I could mispronounce the name, but Gerino by chance?
J Reno, I think it's like J Reno, J Reno. I don't mean to mispronounce his name because he's the one who gave me access to the Yakuza 3 multiplayer mod because he made it. But no, he worked on some of the models for it. And cool thing about the Yakuza modding community is that like it's very collaborative. You're not usually going to see the mod that's made by one person. It's usually one person and like, someone in the community helped work on a model. Another person worked on ideas. I worked on ideas for the ultimate match thing, but
Awesome.
it's very collaborative. And when it came to modding Kenzan, you best believe I have no clue how to get through the files of that stuff. So I was very grateful to meet Oddities, and he helped me get through a lot of the files, load up some fights, figure out how to get some climax battles working, just stuff like that. That's like there was no chance I ever would have seen any of that cut content without Oddities' help. So we shout out to Oddities. But yeah, no, it's definitely like I can't pretend like I am man behind the curtain, masterminding all these like cut content. Like 90% of this stuff is like, yeah, I do some digging for a lot of this stuff, like for putting the video together and doing basic editing. But some of the time it's like there are some people who are more knowledgeable at certain things than I am, and I appreciate whenever I get the chance to work with them to show a video of, did you know there's a secret egg roll in Kenzan or something like that. It's like stuff like that. It's as might not get many views, but it's like there will be some person out there that sees it and is like, dude, I've been interested about the egg roll. I've been wondering what the point of that was.
Damn straight. Okay, well, since we have touched on it, and yeah, I'm gonna end the very last segment of this video in the same way that I've started every bloody segment. So, anything in particular beyond your specific socials that you would like to shout out, or anyone you would like to thank from your from your channel, from your friend group, this type of stuff? Go all.
Yeah, I would like to. I don't really have any socials outside of my YouTube channel. I have an email. If people send me stuff to that email, I'll most likely check it because I have it open on my Chrome tab like all the time. I want to thank Oddities for obviously being the GOAT in helping me find a lot of these things because he's been the cut content video. I started working on it like 8 months before it released and was just the laziest guy in the world, and it got to a point where every time I'd go to edit it some more, we'd find some new groundbreaking, like, did you know this? Did you know there's like a cut character or whatever? And it's like, oh, well, now I gotta spend, the next 4 days researching this because now I'm really interested in like this cut character or whatever. But D-Scout has been nice in helping me with that stuff. My friend All-Star Bros on YouTube, I want to shout him out because he has he has a video on Ishin's weapon crafting system. I have a video on it too, but mine's I literally made it like an hour after I found it, and so it has the most like out-of-date information ever, and it was like really low quality. And when I first uploaded it, I actually had like music play at like 30 times volume at the end of the video, and I had to like to quickly take it down and re-upload it. I want to shout him out because he put together an awesome Ishin crafting video that explains how absolutely insane the like RNG system is and how you can manipulate it and stuff like that. So I want to shout him out because his videos are specifically that one is super well edited, deserves more views than my one. Like I think mine has like 36,000 or something like that, and 90% of the comments are people going, how do I get the sledgehammer seal or whatever? And it's like, there's a video that explains how to do that that's way better than mine and could explain it way better than I can, and I have it pinned in the comments. And then obviously I want to thank all the people that watch, because I didn't think I was going to get more than like 10 subs. I was going to be okay with that. I'm like, 10 subs, that's respectable. That's at least 4 of those people are interested in the videos I watch. The other 6 might be they saw the video and liked it just out of habit, or subbed or whatever. But the people that watch, every comment I get that is sorry, my dog's barking. Every comment I get that is someone going, I'm super interested in this stuff. I'm so happy you shared it. All of that stuff is like, every one of those messages is like, that's me opening up Adobe Premiere Pro again and going back to editing my video, because it's like, you know what? I'm forgetting that there are people here that want to see the stuff. Sorry for my dog barking. He's being really loud right now.
No worries. I love dogs.
I also love dogs. That's why I have one. I want to thank every message. There's one guy specifically I'm going to shout out in the comments, because he was the guy who got me to get back into editing the Kenzan video. Because honestly, I was at a point where it's like, I made it to a 30-minute video. I was planning on cutting it in half, and I was like, I don't know if I want to finish this really. I'm getting out of it. There was one guy who commented on the announcement about the Kenzan video, I believe, that was like, dude, Kenzan is my favorite Yakuza game. I am so absurdly interested to see this content. That guy, specifically shouting out that guy, that guy made me finish that video. That guy saying that stuff was like, this is the exact kind of people I want to see, because it makes me go, you know what? I'm not going to be lazy. I'm going to finish this damn video. And so, you shout out to that guy.
Oh my god, that's amazing. Like, okay, number one, first of all, thank you so much for shouting out All-Star Bros. I just realized that I got the Ishin Platinum thanks to this individual's video. Because the way the RNG there works is just all shades of messed up. There's no amount of censorship that would actually fix me expressing my words about that system. So he did it in such a concise way. He's the only reason that I actually have a platinum there. And the fact that you can even see Sirik in the comment section also thanking him, that should attest to the quality of it.
Yeah, it's definitely like the amount of like research he did for that is like absurd. I had to get some footage for him, which I was fine doing, because I was playing Ishin at the time. I was planning before Ishin came out to do a video that's like comparing OG Ishin to new Ishin, right. And it got to a point where like, as I was playing OG Ishin, I was just like, it got to a point where it's like, I don't even really want to record this anymore. I'm having a good time playing the game. I'm not like, I just turned OBS off. It's like, you know what? I don't really want to pollute my, me playing this game with, gotta record, can't pause, because that's gonna make the recording longer. I gotta do this, I gotta do that. Yeah, I gotta appreciate that he went through it. He worked for like days and days and days. Like, it was like the only thing he was doing. It is a fantastic video. I want more people to see it, because it explains everything you could possibly need to know. And also, I'd like to point out, it calls out how absurd and insane that system is. That it's like, you guys unironically took one of the worst crafting systems in like the entire game. Because like,
it worse.
in the entire series, and somehow made it more bad. Like, I gotta give it credit. I gotta give credit to you guys. I didn't think you could do it. You did it. You guys are better than I thought you were.
Oh my god. Okay, yeah, I can't agree more with you. Just thinking about it brings back painful memories of grinding that bloody stone carver over and over again.
Oh my lord, yeah, it's like just working to, especially Ishin's, I assume this part of the video will be the rambling section, where it's like, we're basically done talking about Ishin for the most part. So if you're not interested in, at this point, we're just rambling about how like bad the crafting system in Ishin is, which is like, honestly, I'm okay with like the Kenzan video. A tiny bit of it's taken up with like, can we talk about how bad the crafting system is in Ishin? And also, I would like to point out how good the crafting system is in Kenzan, because one, none of your swords have durability, which is, really nice, because that's part of an issue why crafting systems in the series in general, most people don't usually bother crafting weapons, because it's like, it's got like 10 durability. I ain't gonna use that. It's gonna break. I'm not gonna go get Rock of the Ages and rare crafting book to craft fake dynamite. Like, I don't care. That's stupid. but in Kenzan, it's like, yeah, you need one hard rock, one rainbow ore, and then the sword and a blueprint. And it's like, and then you immediately have a sword that's like 20 times better than the sword you had previously. I like that a lot. You play Ishin, it's like, you do 2% more damage. We're gonna need 20 gold ore, 34 horns of a small beast, 82 fingernail clippings, and then you will get slightly better sword, and you're still gonna need to grind out 1,000,000 times to get the better, slightly better version that isn't actually all that better. and that the story will probably just give you a better one. That's like that's an additional issue. Is like the story just loves to like, you beat a boss and it's like, this sword does like 400 more damage than every other sword. It has the chance to heal you when you attack someone. It's one of the best swords you've ever seen. You get it for free. You go spend 8 years grinding. You get a sword that's 10 times worse. It's like, bro, come on. You can't do this to me.
I mean, I like the fact that their DLC swords are better than probably 90% of the stuff that you can craft. Saying this as someone who spends probably 15 hours in the final dungeon looking for fucking dragon whiskers.
Exactly, yeah. And it's like that, the one you get from a mon that requires like 20 of the rarest materials. And if you're lucky, you'll get one in the final dungeon. And that's if you're lucky, because there have been times I've done it like 20 times and gotten nothing.
Yep.
So if you get lucky, you only have to do it, I don't know, till like 5 years before you die. So you'll be like 95 or something like that. So it's like, that's not too bad. There's some games that like, if you're playing like Shenmue, you'll be like 100 by the time you beat it. But yeah, no, it's just like, man, I'm really hoping, fingers crossed, no crafting system like that in Gaiden or 8. Please just have it be like, you need a couple rocks, a couple sticks, a couple stones. You got a better basal event. It's like, that's fine with me. Please don't make me get like 200 of the rarest thing I've ever seen that like I can't buy because you only get it from like the Shogi point shop or something.
Oh, fuck that. Okay, seriously, just... I've just gotten off grinding Lost Paradise. That hits way too close to home.
Oh my, Lost Paradise. I got real close to 100%ing it because I'm a big fan. This really is just the rambling part of the video.
I mean, go for it. It's cool.
Yeah, it's I feel like we probably should have done this at the start.
Fair
to get to know each other better, and then we get to the stuff that's more focused. But I guess this is the credits. This is the credits. We're allowed to talk.
No, this is the post credits. This is the developer commentary. That's how good it is.
This is the developer commentary. This is Valve speaking. We're working on reflections for the sand or something. Exactly. I don't know. But yeah, no, I am a big fan of 100%ing the games. Which don't, some people, they hear 100% and they immediately scoff. Okay, listen, I know it's tedious and annoying, and I'm not gonna be smarmy and go like, oh, you have 100% of the game. Just give me a little credit, okay? Sometimes some of the completion's bad, and I don't think it should be. I think completion can be good sometimes. I think I think you can have a good time, getting a certain rank in arcade and not interact with your dogs 400 times or whatever you do in Ishin. It's like, you don't need that. Take that out of the game. But yeah, no, Fist of the North Star is a beast of a game. I would love to talk about that game more extensively at one point, because it's almost really cool, and then almost every system in that game is like actively trying to hurt you. You go to get the talismans, and it's like, oh yeah, you want to get a talisman? Is that it? Okay, so you're gonna need a rare ore, which if you want to get that ore, you have to go get it at the casino, and you're gonna have to gamble for 700 years. And you're like, God. I'd love to do that, dude. I want to do that, of course. No, I enjoy playing roulette 400 times. But yeah, no, like, yeah, the crafting in that game is like, oh man, it does not need to be that way. That game would be much cooler if it was just money. It'd be cool if they didn't have that sub story where you need like $100 million.
Oh my god, you can stupid.
Delete that out of the game. No one will pay no mind to that not being there.
Oh my god. Okay, number one, I hate the fact that because number one, I am a fan of Hokuto no Ken. I haven't read the entire manga, and I haven't watched.
I haven't read it, but I'm a big fan of what I've seen. I think I'm really sad there hasn't been like a really good adaptation of it. Like, you have the anime, which was like, it had a bunch of filler stuff that didn't really need to be there. Okay. Then you have like Ken's Rage and the other media of Fist of the North Star. I think it deserves a really good chance. It could be really popular if it gets a good adaptation. Fist of the North Star is not it, dude. It is not. Or Lost Paradise is not the good adaptation. It's like 90%. Kenshiro, can you go get medicine for me? Okay, I got you the medicine. Can you tell me what I need to know now? Actually, no. You're suspected of murder. And it's like, oh my, dude, just move the plot forward, please. I'm begging you.
Exactly. Oh my god, just... Okay, shoutouts to the old hag with 100 million ideal that you need to pay. I'm sure it's gonna make... Okay, this is probably gonna be posted after the fact, but Froob, a great Yakuza content creator and a streamer, he's actually going for an all sub-story stream of Lost Paradise. I have no idea how he manages to sort all that out, but I'm gonna leave that in the description as well, because fuck, you need to be really, really adamant on going that far for these games. And here's the thing, as you've said, 100% in these games doesn't need to be boring, but some of these games make it boring. Saying this as someone who platinumed almost every game here.
Yeah, I definitely, I would love to make a video at some point, which I've said that about like 8 different topics, because that's just how I am. I'm like, I'd love to make that a video, and then I go back to like, I don't know, eating Cheetos, watching like YouTube videos.
Right.
I would love to make a video just like talking about like, I'm not saying completionists deserve the utmost respect, but like some of this stuff is like completing Yakuza 4 is not nearly as bad as like completing Ishin.
Exactly.
And it's proof that like, doing like, get a high score in the minigame is way more preferable over play this minigame 100 times. You can't get better at playing a minigame 100 times.
Precisely.
You just go in, you leave, you go in, you leave, you do that 100 times. It's just a waste of time is what it is. And it's like, look, completion can be good, okay? Recent games have been excellent about this stuff.
Yes.
They've been like, just get all parts. It's like, of course, get all parts. Like, get a high score on all these songs. Yeah, of course I'm gonna do that. This game's awesome.
Exactly.
Things like that. It's like, just do that. Don't do, the most menial thing you've ever heard of. And like the funny thing is the hag in I think she's like old woman. Calling her hag is funny though.
Yeah, exactly.
In Lost Paradise is like, that's not even completion, that's just sub stories.
Yeah,
like I don't even usually
basically
consider a mon as like a completion thing, because it's like most people generally will go towards a mon unless it's like do hostesses for an hour, and then they're gonna be like, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
But most people are generally like, yeah, I'll do that. But gosh, that one where you gotta get 100 IDL, which I believe you need to do like, I think every cabaret club thing you do in Lost Paradise nets you, I think it's either $1 mil or $2 mil for yourself, and then the same off the debt, and then you can pay however much you want from your own money. That amount, like I think at a bare minimum, you have to do the final one 25 times perfectly.
Yeah.
To get that much money, and that's not including the all the missions you have to do beforehand, all the stuff you have to set up for. Yeah, oh gosh, I do not envy Froob. I cannot imagine, because either Froob's gonna do the cabaret club, which I never would recommend that to anybody, or I think like death batting in that game can net you a sum if you do it right.
I hate that.
It's half the time it doesn't work. Yeah. It's like, it shouldn't be the way it is. It's like half the time you go to hit and like you're hitting them right in the spot in which should send them flying, but then it just hits the front of them and you get like 2 points, and it's like, dude, I feel like I'm playing a like Winnie the Pooh baseball, that like impossible flash game with how hard these shots are. But yeah, no, it's like death batting, and then I think if you got really lucky doing roulette, you could probably like, if you got really lucky, if you got like 7 wins in a row type lucky, you could probably get that sub story done pretty fast, but you also have to get lucky to do that, and I don't envy anyone that has to. As someone who has, may God have mercy on your soul.
I sincerely want to thank you for taking the time out of your day
well,
to chat.
Well, thank you for having me. I've been a fan for a while. I enjoyed, I think I commented on a couple of your older videos, the Hanya Advocate, which is a series I enjoy because it's like, you go into, here's the thing, here's a point of contention for a lot of people. I'm gonna dissect it and give my own takes on it, and set it up in such a way that the people watching can give their own takes on it. I think that stuff's awesome, and it was, I was a little, it's a bit weird to say starstruck, but it was a little like, I was like, I had to, get a nice chair. I was sitting down. I'm like, I prepare for hopping in the voice check. It's like, ooh, I've watched this guy for a while. It's pretty nice to like finally get to talk. It was a really good time. I had a blast.
Oh my god. Okay, so once again, thank you. And thank you to everyone who watched this. Just please, for the love of God, check his stuff out, because if you even have the slightest interest in Kenzan, he'll give you all of the content that you want. I'm saying this as someone who had no interest in diving into Kenzan this close to Gaiden, and I'm actually kind of trying to fix my laptop around so that I can actually emulate it properly because of this content. So again, check it out, you're not gonna be sorry.
End scene.
Yeah, and scene.
End scene.
And there you have it. I'm really glad this video wound up seeing the light of day, as there's been a number of technical issues present that made it nigh impossible to complete. Though I guess that's par for the course for any of my collabs at this point. Once again, thank you to Yakuza Archive channel for the lovely conversation, and apologies it took so long to complete. Now, if you'd like to see more content akin to this video, well, I'd like to direct you to Leon's channel. As of the time of writing, he started a proper RGG themed podcast that I've had the immense pleasure of contributing towards, so if you could show your support there, it would mean a lot to me as well. As for this channel, regular analyses and discussion pieces will continue as usual. So consider today's video a special celebration to start the new year right. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you soon. So, until next time, take care of yourselves and have a great day. Cheers!